I was walking out of a theater when I was a kid when I saw Jurassic Park, and I said, that's what I'd like to do. And so on the heels of that, I went to school for it, and I've been in visual effects, the only job I've ever had.
I came here to find safety, but one is never safe from the past.
Please, sir, someone's after me.
I have an appointment.
Your name, please, sir?
Picard, P-I-C-A-R-D.
It's nice to see you up and around again.
I went to college at Cal State Northridge, and I was part of a degree which was at the time called video film art, which would later become their visual effects discipline, but at the time they didn't have a name for it yet. And it was just basically sort of getting your feet wet with filmmaking, and also, you know, sort of a leaning towards the technology behind that, you know, using both, you know, 2D and 3D software like After Effects and I want to say Cinema 4D, maybe 3D Studio Max at the time. At each point along the way in my career, I've had the good fortune to meet a lot of people that taught me different things. I'm a compositor, that's where my background lies. But along the way, there were so many different people. Like at the VES, Tom Atkin was the name of the executive director at the time who helped start the VES, and he was very, very formative for me in understanding sort of the business aspects of the visual effects and all the different players involved, all the different vendors at the time, the names of the different, you know, supervisors and producers. So I really got a good lay of the land and who was who. And then I just sort of learned from everybody along the way. I mean, the nice thing about VFX, especially, you know, then, and I'm sure it's the same now, is everybody was so willing to sort of share information and grow together because we were learning so much about what we were doing. So I think that was one of the fun parts of it. I am a big Star Trek fan for sure, and so it was definitely something when I got the call and the opportunity that I couldn't pass up. From a visual effects perspective, what was appealing about Picard was it is different, I think, stylistically than Discovery. And we were going to do different things, and that was one of the things we had discussed. So I was also really excited to be able to sort of stretch our legs as a visual effects team and try different things out. Working with these you know, canon things like the Enterprise and the Borg Cube and all those, it's always a little bit daunting to be responsible for something that's so revered and been depicted so many times. So what you definitely don't want to do is go back and start from scratch. I mean, you have probably the best amount of research and reference humanly possible for any show. So you definitely start there and want to make sure that you don't do anything that doesn't make any sense. And that's, you know, for us, a very important part of the process is doing our research and sort of checking with everybody who knows, you know, the Star Trek universe to ensure that we're actually treating these things appropriately, that we're not doing anything that is not part of canon or would otherwise, you know, not be what was expected from Star Trek or from the fans. The environment work was one of the, I think, the fun parts of Picard too, because I think we had a lot to do, and probably a little bit more than we do on Discovery. And so it was kind of nice to do the set extension portion of things and to sort of, you know, try, you know, different approaches. I mean, fortunately for us, the art department starts us off on a great foot with their, you know, concept art and reference drawings and everything. And then, yeah, we just, you know, we sort of set about finding the right sort of location for a plate that we could shoot it on, and then sort of started adding the CG elements in there. And I think in the case of that, and also in Free Cloud and Boston as well, there's a great deal of layering that goes on. I think you first sort of establish the basic geometry and layout of the city or the location that you're shooting, and then you start to go in and sort of dress things to camera, like sky traffic, shuttles, holograms, all that sort of thing, to sort of flesh the world out and make it feel scopy, because that's what you want out of those shots, right? Is they're usually establishing a scene that's about to happen. And so being able to be a part of that and sort of establish scope and sort of doing something that helps take you into the scene is a really fun part of the process. With the cube, it's such a gigantic thing. And when you're in space, it's always a challenge to show scope and scale, because unless you show an iteration of things next to the cube, you really don't have a reference point as to how big it is. So is it something small that's close to camera? Is it something gigantic that's very far away? In the early stages in the previs, you know, work on your composition and sort of figure out ways to layer in things that allow us to get a little bit of scale. You know, if we see somebody in a ship and then we put the ship next to the cube, we're starting to get a sense of, well, if that human being is 6 feet tall, that ship is, you know, roughly X, Y big. The cube is much, much larger. So I think it definitely was a challenge, and we learned a lot about, you know, establishing scale and distance and scope in those shots. And I also think at some point it can become too much. And so, you know, exercising a little restraint and not flying, you know, the distance of 5 planets in 30 seconds, which it's just impossible. You're never going to get that shot with a camera. And to be fair, some of these you wouldn't get anyway. But I think you also do definitely start with how would you get the shot practically if you had to. and then sort of go from there. And then you just sort of interpolate the camera and sort of start your animation blocking and try and set up something that looks as real life as you possibly can get it. You know, season 1 of a show is always a little bit difficult to set up. There's always, you know, you're sort of, you know, learning so many things about a whole new world. I mean, it's world building, right? And so, you know, what does the new world of Picard look like now? And sort of working through those challenges, understanding, you know, what looks good and doesn't, and just sort of, again, it's the Star Trek universe, and there's a very high standard that has been set by everybody who came before us in visual effects in Star Trek and other places, and so we got to do our best to keep it up and do it justice. Working in visual effects, I mean, especially now, it's such a good time for visual effects with what everybody's working on, but I mean, we do things like spaceships and dinosaurs and robots and monsters and all those things, and it's, I mean, how can you complain about that job? I mean, it's very stressful, and there are difficult times like there are with any job, but I mean, I'm working on Star Trek, on one of the biggest, you know, franchises in TV history, doing visual effects, which is what I wanted to do for a job, so I would be a fool to do anything but be very grateful for it.